Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Professor Rodrigue. I'm a chair professor of the College of Engineering and the Associate Director for Resilient Sustainable Supply Chain at the Energy Institute on behalf of the Director of the Institute, Professor Stratos Pistikopoulos. It's my real pleasure to offer and introduce a great speaker that we have today under a unique venue. That unique venue is the event is co-organized by the Mosbacher Institute for Trade, Economics and Public Policy of the Bush School of Government and Public Service, of which I have the privilege of serving also as a co-director of the Global Value Chains program within the Mosbacher Institute. So the lecture is provided jointly by the Mosbacher and the Texas A&M Energy Institute, one of the two centers, institutes of Texas A&M that spans all different colleges across the great Texas A&M system. The title of today's talk is Footprint of E-commerce and Distribution in the Distribution Network of a Small Company Called Amazon. The great speaker that we have today is Professor Jean-Paul Rodrigue out of Hofstra University. He's a professor of the Department of Global Studies and Geography, and how he found himself in the great state of Texas. He's been appointed since last year as the Distinguished Fellow of the Hagler Institute for Advanced Studies at the Department of Maritime Transportation, Maritime Administration at Texas A&M Galveston. Dr. Jean-Paul Rodrigue's research interests cover areas that are very complementary what we're doing at the Mosbacher and the Global Value Chains program, but also at the Texas A&M Energy Institute. And for me, the sheer pleasure of having Jean-Paul today is a manifestation of the synergies that exist between these two entities that actually strive for a long time ago. Professor Rodrigue is working on transportation and global freight distribution. That means he has a phenomenal presence in port management globally, that I'll let him talk about it. Transport, so maritime transport systems and logistics, global supply chains, gateways, think about ports, and transport corridors. He ranks among the top 2% most cited scholars in the world and among the top 100 in the field of transport and logistics. He developed, just share with me, and thank you, Jean-Paul, for this, a widely used online reference textbook about transportation, the geography of transport systems. Now it's in its 5th edition. He co-authored the textbook titled Port Economics, Management and Policy, who published in January 2022. That's a Bible for a lot of, I knew before even I met you, maritime economists, logistics operators. So this is a family that I was privileged to work with for a long time in Europe. In 2019, he was the recipient of the Edward L. Allman Award for outstanding contribution to the field of transport geography by the Association of American Geographers. For people who read, we believe that this is readers are leaders and leaders are readers. In the last section, the last copy of The Economist, in an article which I found fascinating, Global Commerce Shipping Forecast, that has to do about the increased role of a legacy infrastructure that is key to global supply chains, namely ports and maritime shipping, the new challenges that are including resilience and sustainability. Professor Rodrigue is quoted with all his great work. Jean-Paul, great having you. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to a great talk. So he's gracious enough to talk about 5 hours, but he said before the end of the talk, he will allocate 5 or 10 minutes for questions. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Like online, because you see the full screen of my
Now they don't experience your warmth in person, but that's surprising.
We created some kind of a gagging reflex.
Well, they have to bring the credits.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. This presentation is a bit of a paradox in some ways, because by training, by interest, and by most of my work, I'm a type of fourth in global supply chain, international trade type of person. And I say, this guy is talking about last mile logistics, basically, which is Amazon. And it's basically at the end, when we talk about the global supply chain, basically when we talk about this, we talk about the end of it, basically when it gets to your door. That's what essentially. Why I did something like that, because I was interested, I most of the time study with our, what we call the footprint of things, how much space they take, how much real estate it takes. And I said, okay, let's have a look at this subject. And I had a look at it, and it became a very, very, very fascinating topic. Papers and some research about that. So I'm going to share a little bit of my observation with you. Even though technically my full-time interests are mostly dealing with maritime import supply chain issues, but nothing prevents you to deal with other stuff. So let's talk about e-commerce, which technically, so every one of you is about some kind of an expert about that. I would be surprised that none of you have bought anything online, but there are consequences and repercussions with this. Because very often, and that's a fun we can have, let's begin a little bit. A term which is very popular these days, maybe it's a little bit abused, it's called digitalization or digitalization, to try to put an IT component to pretty much anything, particularly documentation processes. Maybe I assume a lot of your research may be involved into this. But how would you like to define e-commerce and have some kind of fun here? I call it distribution-based consumption. That is, consumption can only take place if there are very efficient logistical capabilities enabling it. So it's a very simple definition, but that's why it exists. Retail has been about distribution for a long period of time. A lot of important, I would say, logistic components, for instance, cross-docking systems, things like that, were the creation of major retailers. And then came Amazon, among others, and they created, I would say, a new form of consumption, with the consumption contingent upon the capacity to distribute. So when you do something like that, it means that your inventory is shifting. In retail, the inventory, of course, we talk about inventory in transit, inventory, the mobility of the inventory. When we talk about e-commerce, the outcome is a shift of the inventory from the store to the warehouse. So e-commerce, distribution-based consumption, and the inventory shift from the store to the warehouse. It sounds simple, but the consequences of that are absolutely dramatic. There are a series of outcomes, and here I call that, we live in what we call the cardboard box era. Welcome to it. And the impact of e-commerce on, you could say, freight distribution and retail can be simplified or organized in 4 value propositions. Some of you are keenly aware of it because you've been studying them extensively. The first thing is a change in the distribution pattern of it. A growth of B2C. We know that pretty well. It's been in literature for decades. But we'll see what Amazon does with that. It has created its entirely in-house distribution structure. So, new form of distribution. And this one is absolutely mind-boggling, a shift in the real estate footprint. From the classic retail, of course, retail is accessibility to consumer, which can be physically present. Therefore, essentially, retail used to be central business district, shopping malls, and things like that. And now you're switching the inventory to somewhere else, which used to tend to be single floor warehouses in the suburbs. This has a very strong impact in the value of urban land use. People are now investing massively in warehouses, and if you want to lose money, again, I'm sorry if somebody you might invest in retail portfolios. That would be a little bit of a risk, because I get lots of phone calls. People now, all the major retailers or people managing real estate portfolios say, we want to invest in warehousing. It tells you a story that the priority, or would say the assets of the system has shifted to a new form of spatial dynamics. And we're going to look a lot about that today. So that's the second consequence. The third one is the creation of entirely new logistical facilities. If you asked me 20 years ago what was an e-fulfillment center, I would have looked at you with deer eyes. Deer in the head, like, what the hell are you talking about? What the heck is a sortation center? What is an urban logistic depot? All of these entirely new facilities have emerged because of e-commerce. So that's the third outcome. And the last one, like any other 3PL and 4PL around the world, e-commerce are control freaks. That is their goal, their purpose is to establish a vertically integrated supply chain. That is, of course, not necessarily from the factory door, although they buy lots of stuff, but they want to make sure they control the whole process, because by doing so, they have a level of visibility, a level of control. They can, I'm going to show you the dirty little tricks they play. They can route freight to optimize their own assets, as opposed to the assets of other 3PLs. That's very interesting type of thing. They do that because they want to take control of the process. And by doing that, they're also offering you a very well-defined type of time window. And actually, when they do that, they want to reduce, of course, the lead time as much as possible, because they want to lessen what we call buyer's remorse. That's something people are less aware of. When you buy something, you might change your mind. And as soon as they ship it, you're sorry, you can no longer change your mind. So they want to make sure that they put things out as quickly as possible. Again, there are lots of interesting psychological issues behind this, which we won't be talking about. So that's the 4 aspects. Of course, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on today. And again, it's another classic type of representation. It has changed retail. Again, this is very, very well known from a classic type of system where you had a supply chain, which is essentially B2B to the store, and you're taking care of yourself of the last mile. This is well known, and now we're switching this to a platform where you have home deliveries and, of course, all the process which are involved into this. And what is fun about that is the e-retailer is becoming some kind of a platform which decides how to allocate and route the orders to what we call e-fulfillment centers. And based upon where is your location, it's going to be, of course, routing these orders at specific facilities, designed to optimize essentially the whole system. And again, this brings very interesting issues. And we don't have an answer to that one, but that could be a very interesting topic of research. I mean, you free advice. What is our e-commerce system more energy efficient than standard retail type of systems? I think there's a fair amount of research out there, but as far as I can tell, I'm not entirely certain, because this has a lot of opportunities for consolidation, massification, optimization. This has much less capability. Of course, you can optimize this, but this is a little bit more difficult to do. So that's an interesting type of question. Is this more sustainable and efficient than this? A heck of a question, because there's, of course, pros and cons in both cases. And so far, the answer is not entirely clear. Maybe somebody's aware of something I'm not aware of. If you are, please let me know, because I would like to have interesting, you would say, evidence or information for this. But that's a fantastic research topic where all OR and things that can be readily applied to measure the efficiency of this. Okay, moving on. The impact of e-commerce on the retail sector is actually very well known. And if you review the literature, this is pretty much what you get. 2 major impacts. First of all, deflationary impact. Second of all, discriminatory impact. Deflationary impact is obviously it reduces the cost of transactions, the cost of searching, the cost of the advantage you have with information asymmetry. In a store, you have not that many options, so you're somewhat forced to take what is available. With online, the asymmetry of information has been substantially reduced, wherefore you can look for opportunities. And of course, the issue of menu costs is catalog costs has been reduced quite substantially. So e-commerce creates deflation in terms of the cost structure of retail. It also creates more opportunity for discrimination. And again, be careful when you use that term, okay? I mean that term in a very generic fashion. That is, you can price things out more efficiently based upon who you are, what are your customer. Sometimes you can look at zip code and look at the level of income in this just zip code. And maybe you have realized that at some point at your time, if you buy a ticket, you buy something online based upon where you are, you might have some slight price differences. So this is called some kind of geo-database-based price discrimination. It's also allow you a form of, like the airline loves to do, dynamic pricing. That is price based upon pure supply-demand mechanism, and you adjust the price based upon what is your inventory available, and as the inventory drops, you have the propensity to increase the price. You can do that almost in real time. Of course, you know that pretty damn well. If you sometimes follow things, you get an email, the price of this has changed up, the price of this has changed down, you get all these type of notifications. So that's what e-commerce does. It deflate cost to a certain extent, and it implements a series of discrimination segmentation type of mechanism, which can go all the way to the individual preference of the customer, as opposed to retail, which overall is more generic. Again, this is well known in the retail literature. There's nothing new there, but that's some kind of a synthesis. Okay, I had a very, very tough time to find real cost information. Sorry if you told me. Okay, so what I found, again, a couple of examples. Again, if you have some data, would be eager to see what is the cost structure compared with retail and e-commerce. That's what I found. Okay, that is overall the major cost of retail. Of course, we know that it's real estate, store, labor in store. When you have e-commerce, you have the same technically. If you, let's say you have this situation similar when you're a big retailer or a big e-commerce platform, you pay the same factory cost at the origin, but what changes overall because of a lower cost structure, because you occupy lower cost real estate in the suburbs. Amazon, among others, is very keenly sensitive to low cost location when you build their warehouses. Because you know, in the real estate often or retail is to sell, you have to pay a high price because you need a good location. So good location are associated with e-commerce. You break this apart. So you reduce this, and overall you can have either a higher profit margin, but that's what they do. They reduce the cost of this, and then they compete with that, and they kill them by doing something like that. So that's one I had. Of course, it varies by computer, whatsoever type of goods we're talking about, but the one I was able to find was something there, and the cost was quite, I would say, evident in our. Okay. I like this one. This tells you interesting transitions, because as the demand for e-commerce grows, so does the demand for parcel delivery services. Surprise, and many actually what keeps USPS afloat these days is e-commerce. The revenue generated by the mail has been steadily declining. There's over first class and second class mail. You know, who opens? What do you get in your mailbox these days? It's basically advertising. Have you ever received a letter? We call a letter. No. So you get the point. This is going down, and at the same time, for USPS, United States Postal Services, UPS, FedEx, and now Amazon is also taking care of that. The number of parcels increased quite dramatically. So that's again a way you can measure it each year. Again, in the retail as well, it's very, very interesting to basic density, I would say, figures in terms of retail space per capita as of 2017. Again, it looks that is not that easy to get, surprisingly. The United States, as far as I could tell, had the highest amount of square footage per capita in the world, which tells you there is tremendous room for losing that stuff. And overall, of course, the amount of stores, retail store amounts each year has been steadily increasing. Of course, it does not show you store openings, but the overall store closures always exceed. And therefore, the retail footprint in this country is declining. If you don't believe me, one of the booming businesses is how to decorate shopping malls to hide stores that are closed. You put some facade, that's a booming business. So obviously, if the United States has a similar retail footprint, let's say another big e-commerce user such as South Korea, China as well, actually, this would involve a substantial decline. And actually, Amazon is buying some to use as warehouses or last mile type of facilities. But still, that's a huge problem. How are you going to negotiate the transition of all this footprint that's going to essentially vanish as people buy more and more stuff online? What impact is going to have on the value of land, the capacity of city to generate taxation revenue? That's a hell of a question. And I'm not here to answer it, just simply to tell you what I see. Okay, so let's look at locational dynamics. Again, the literature is very clear about that. Any of you look at what are the location design or the location criteria for warehouses and distribution center, you come up with a series of factors that are basically well known for decades, and the impact, their sensitivity, you could say, or their component into the total locational behavior of things have been thoroughly investigated in the economics or locational economic literature. This has been there a very, very long time. What we do here is pretty simple. We apply this long-standing approach to e-commerce and to see what matters and what less matters for e-commerce. Again, price sensitivity, the potential for massification, shopping malls, and now we have huge fulfillment centers, the throughput capability, the possibility for co-location. A shopping mall is a facility which is built upon the principle of co-location. And therefore, the summation of all the stores is better than the individual store in themselves. So that's why the shopping mall is a co-location. You benefit from proximity. We don't have that much in e-commerce, but we have co-location of different type of facilities, which happens. Of course, lead time, and therefore also the potential for automation, in which Amazon, among others, is investing massively. The last thing they cannot, a quick question. What do you think is the most difficult to automate in a fulfillment center? Storage, retrieval, stacking? I'll tell you. When somebody is putting items in a box, this is excessively complicated problem. The person will solve that spatially, visually in 3D. And that's why that process is very difficult to automate. Everything else can be automated. This one is the last. That's why that's basically what people do in the fulfillment center. They don't walk around to pick up stuff. The stuff is being delivered to them in automation with bins, and they're the one organizing and packing things up. So if you get some kind of a weird box or it's too big, okay, it's the optimization did not take place very well. The person was pressed on time, but too quickly, whatever, maybe the box was not there, put that stuff in, send it your way, put a lot of stuff in. And this, so that's again, so this clear, simple, self-evident chart here, sarcastic a little bit, is essentially the distribution structure of Amazon. People think Amazon is basically fulfillment centers, and then you order stuff, it comes. No. Amazon is a hierarchy of facilities, excessively specialized, each fulfilling, pun intended, a specific role in the process. And it's essentially a supply chain and its components. And some of you are quite aware of those. And Amazon have also external components to this, such as 3PLs, UPS, FedEx, which it has the choice of using, and good old USPS. But otherwise, Amazon tries to internalize as much as it can within this system, because by doing so, it controls, monitor every step of the process, all the way down up to a locker at Whole Food or to your individual address. And again, we're going to look at this typology, and each of the road, their location, their footprint, you'll see they're very, very different. The latest one, and again, this one is still need to be properly assessed, is Amazon as an air freight carrier. I'm still not entirely sure about what are the exact circumstances in which it uses air cargo operation. Is it for deliveries from one distribution center across the country to the customer because it's far away and the delivery center was very specialized? That is, they might have one or two for the United States and therefore very long distances, so you put this on your cargo. Or is it to shuffle cargo within? I'm not entirely, I would say, aware of it. So let's have a look. We won't spend too much time on that one. This one is fantastic.
So Paul, just to tell you, so what they're doing is they're leasing cargo. They don't own cargo planes.
Yes, I know.
Amazon Air. What is Bezos' passion? To avoid legal issues, unionized issues with pilots, right? So he's doing the same thing. But what I do know for a fact, they're using cargo for long distances.
Yeah, obviously, rare cargo. But again, how it fit their strategy remains to be seen. These two facilities did not exist 7-8 years ago. These were entirely created out of it. This is the fastest growing facility Amazon is having now. It's last mile logistics. It started up here and then added up a few of those. And then eventually it added up those. This was a temporary experiment. Prime. Because now, for what I understand, again, there's so many things happening, it's tough to follow everything. It drives you literally insane. So it's how much of this is now, they're so efficient that they now can be re-internalize this. Wait, I'm not sure, because I've not built any new of those. They're still operational, but I've not built any of those in about 5 or 6 years. Because again, those were Amazon Prime Hub, Fast Delivery Hub. I'll explain what they are. They were smaller distribution center built close to customers for high demand good that you could deliver very quickly. Because this was not working that well, and say, okay, let's open ourselves up an option. And now my suspicion is it worked, and now they're so good that this can be now brought back in. I suspect this might disappear, or they're going to be reconverted to other uses.
Call them regionalized supply chains, right? So
Yeah.
be closer to the customer.
Okay, what is the data? Again, it's a database published by a consulting firm. They were very nice with me because the guy liked my. Okay, so okay, I'll let you use my. data.
Everybody likes it.
Okay,
Like
yeah. No. Once you know me, no.
That's why we did.
Okay.
I mean, the Bush School loved you,
Okay.
right? So which do not.
There's going to be regrets. Okay, to move on. It is again, they try to keep an inventory of all the Amazon facilities in the United States. It's essentially monastic work because I took every single location of every single Amazon facility in this country, 1,200 of them approximately right now, growing at an exponential rate, and put a dot on their roof. And put that stuff into a GIS, for analysis. So essentially what I did, I had a footprint and square foot. Again, you have to be careful with square footage because now they're designing automated facilities are. So we're gonna have some fun with that one. Okay, we're gonna have to find ways to be. I'm sure maybe we're gonna switch from square footage to cubic. I wish I got cubic, but anyway. So we have about 1,200 facilities, about 9–10% of them are co-located. That is, it can be a fulfillment center and a delivery station within the same facility. So they're, and what is the pattern of co-location? Simple, opportunistic. What fits their strategy nearby, and that's what they do. I didn't see any particular logic, although there's no co-location with inbound cross-docking. So here's the footprint as of 2022, as of December. Okay. In terms of how much percentage of the total square footage each facility takes. Of course, the great majority of Amazon assets are still the blue thing, which are fulfillment center. Look at the share of last mile hub. This does not convey any useful storage function. It's simply a logistical facility, throughput based, to break down the load, deconsolidation into basically specific delivery around. This is called Amazon Post Office, if you wish. And those are also excessively important. Sortation center. Again, Amazon is now copying what UPS and FedEx invented 25 years ago. These gigantic sortation hub, particularly for Air Hub in Louisville and Memphis. Those facilities are absolutely gigantic. And Amazon is doing that at the more of the metropolitan area level. And this one also has grown quite substantially. That is the inbound cross-docking facility. I'll explain what it is later. So that's what it is. Again, average square foot standard deviation. We'll look at those later on, but we see here distinct square footage. These are big. Again, there's a logic there. Okay, moving on. This is the annual growth of the footprint since 1997, since Amazon began. And overall, I have identified 5 stages in the growth process. Could be argued, you can do some kind of statistical analysis behind this. This is not based upon, let's say, a factor analysis or whatsoever, simply visually looking at what Amazon has been doing. It began, actually, if Amazon was following its initial business plan, it will no longer exist. It was selling books and CDs. These are disappeared. Okay, but it began as that, as a niche e-commerce company trying to find a business model. We're going to sell books because they're high value item, tough to find. And then, of course, as 2000 move on, as things were getting more and more digital, their business models was no longer relevant. So they basically diversified into a true e-commerce platform, start to sell crap, okay, stuff online. And then when they did that, after a while, they had to undertake a process of horizontal integration, market, coverage. And when they did that, their inefficiencies start to be complicated. And then they undertake a process of vertical integration by the creation of these facilities that integrate the supply chain together. And this is the impact of the pandemic. Amazon went full ballistic, acquired more real estate in 1 year than it did in the previous 6, 7, 8 years. 1 year, and then 2021 as well, and of course, again, they still need some data to be compiled here. It might be a little bit more, but this is essentially the fifth thing, the pandemic surge that e-commerce undertook. Yes.
So the other thing that triggered there, of course, was the idea of the marketplace that developed, right? So not only they're selling their own, but now they're selling
Yes.
with a very, I mean, we can talk about for hours there, the weird way of cannibalizing supply chains of
Oh,
suppliers
yes.
and all the great stuff.
That's what they do. If that's like the diapers.com story. That is, and maybe some of you are familiar with it. You are a company, you develop independently, and if you have a good business model, you start a partnership with Amazon or whatever, then they're gonna, if you're profitable, they're gonna buy you. They're gonna bring you in. So you have to be very careful about that in that case. So marketplace will work well if you're a very specialized niche type of thing. As soon as you grow, you become a target for potential capture. If the business model is big enough and scalable enough. If you remain niche, they're gonna leave you doing your stuff. So it's a double-edged sword.
So I don't want to take time, but when we talk about this is critical, right? So if you're Amazon's customer, offer through the marketplace, if you're doing well, they're going to ask you to disclose your supply chain. And if you are willing to do that, most probably in the searches you will show up later and later, right? Whenever you disclose your supply chain, that's where they can copy the supply chain in another country without buying you.
Yeah.
So-
Again,
so
this
that's a
is
very
that
good
minefield, because my lawyers will be talking to lawyers, so I don't want them.
Well, this is published. This is published. The latest book about Amazon actually covers that. Yeah.
Quite aggressive, but again, they behave rationally. Maybe anybody in their position will do something similar. If they do this because they can. Okay, so, and this maps pretty much exactly the growth of e-commerce retail sales in the United States, the impact of the pandemic, the surge, and then a little bit of a readjustment because now people can go back. So that's essentially an interesting similarity that it is no surprise whatsoever there. Okay, so let's have a look at how this footprint evolved. This is very, very different than retail. Maybe some of you are familiar with the classic growth pattern of Walmart and Target. How do they grow? Proximity effect. They expand from their point of origin and they grow through, you could say, a form of contagious proximity type of thing. It's like you're studying the diffusion of a virus or something like that. It does like that. Because this ground in retail, proximity customer, and then they simply expand by extending their supply chain, bringing managers in stores, and then they hop and they up and then until they cover the whole thing. That's a classic type of Walmart. Amazon has not done this at all because Amazon is parcels and based upon distributional capabilities. It began actually in places which are relatively central in terms of accessibility to supply chain, outside high taxation areas. It was a contention factor for a while. Amazon was in states which were not taxing e-commerce transaction. Of course, this was harmonized. Eventually, no longer became a factor. But then, when they start to that, you see, they start to go here. Say, what the hell is that? Ohio, Kentucky. This is essentially the demographic center of the United States. If you measure distribution of the population, Amazon follows an optimal type of logistical accessibility of the American market. And as time move on, again, they fill up the dots. They fill up the location, but they move from instead of moving laterally, like most retail, they have moved as a hierarchy. They chose a point of maximum accessibility, at least as far as they perceive it, and then they go down this hierarchy until the whole damn market gets covered. So instead of contagious, hierarchical diffusion to move to the point of maximum customers, and then you go to the more and more marginal market as well. And in the same process, you horizontally diffuse and vertically integrate. And that's what it is. Now we are now, I suspect right now we have reached, that could be subject to contention, and we reached peak Amazon. Or not? Remains to be seen. Okay, so let's have a look at these facilities. First one, which we don't know much about. The inbound cross-docking facility. This is how the stuff enters the network. The major purpose of these facilities which tend to be all located nearby ports or major intermodal facilities or major industrial clusters. It is where, or international trade, where the containers arrive full of the good. And then on one side, the container, on the other side, a truck, which we don't see very well here, but it's a cross-docking facility. On one side, international input containerized, and then broken down into loads, domestic loads that are sent to e-fulfillment center. So these facilities tend to be quite big. And again, this is their location, the distribution of the square footage, roughly around a similar size facility, which is dominant, around 650,000 square foot. Again, they run models and design. This is the type of facility we need for that. And then they cookie cutter it, they replicate it. And you have clusters based upon their ports of entry. Because most of the stuff coming to Amazon is purchased from Asia or other parts of the world. You can enter domestically. In other parts, those are mostly rail terminals. But most of it, I would say 54%, as far as I measured it, of all the inbound cross-docking facility are port-centric. They're nearby a major gateway to the United States. And this is how the stuff arrived across Asia, the Pacific, coming from China. And actually, initially, I'm going to start up here and then move to there. And the latest acquisition are in Seattle because it wants to diversify. And it was also its response to port congestion was to try to diversify its inbound cross-docking facilities across a wide span market. So New York also is a very big point of entry. About 13% of all the square footage, as far as I measure it, was in that metropolitan area. So first one. Second one, the classic e-fulfillment center. That's where you click. This is where the magic takes place. In this case, obviously, it is a single side docking facility that is self-executive. Those are parking lot for employees. And obviously, they tend to have suburban location. They tend to be nearby a major parcel hub from another 3PL. And they are surprisingly diversified. Amazon technically doesn't care about the item. It only cares if this item is sortable or non-sortable. If it can be put in an automated conveyor belt, or if it has to be handled by forklifts and pallets, things like that. So by doing so, Amazon has created a hierarchy of e-fulfillment facility. I'll skip this specific image. That is that you see how this port sold. All of this is automated, and he's specifically putting those boxes together in I would say quite a dynamic process.
And each of these facilities cost money, right? It costs about 1 billion for it. The investment is huge.
Yes, partly because of automation.
The 8 of them in Dallas.
Yeah. So that's the location. This is the median mean center. That is, what if I've weighted the distribution, the location of every facility by their size, and what is the center, the geographic center of it all, right here. And that's the demographic center of the United States. Good. So Amazon has an optimal market coverage strategy. As simple as that. Again, it's simple, but you measure it, and here it is. So those are the facilities, and I notice 3 clusters in their size. The big e-fulfillment facility, then the specialized facility, handling jewelry, for instance, sometimes toys, things like that. And then the latest one, which are getting smaller and smaller, surprisingly, they call them mini fulfillment center. Those are basically, I suspect, the new prime coming up, where you create smaller centers, sometimes co-located with a sortation center, co-located with a delivery hub, where you can cover the market very rapidly in less than 24 hours. And again, as I mentioned, the point is if this is sortable or not. That's how it works. That's why when you look, again, I'm not looking at that into detail, but the storage mechanism within Amazon e-fulfillment center is absolutely chaotic because they store everything. Because in some way they're sorting alphabetically by product type. But here, it comes in and you simply allocate that randomly. You simply care about the space. How long it's not perishable or damageable, things like that. You're gonna see a mixture of goods. What the heck? Diapers, a router, and a toy has anything to do. It's simply the way they go in and go down, and the retrieval is also, they found out the retrieval randomly works as well as efficiently as if it was stored. in a more rational fashion. Again, quite fun. So overall, it is tend to be a sortable or a non-sortable game. And they're specialized. The largest one, the largest number of facilities are non-sortable facilities. That is, it requires more labor. Therefore, proximity to market, the goods are bigger. Proximity to market is more important because it consumes more energy. Therefore, you tend to have more of those closer and more distributed. Then sortable, then you have specialized, again, I mentioned that. And then the latest one, it's growing up, returns. Something we don't know about e-commerce. Based upon some surveys I've done myself, about 5 to 10% of all the e-commerce purchases are returned. It varies with footwear, it's much higher. Others, it's much lower. And we have a little understanding of the reverse of this. So that's again a very interesting type of topic to see in which type of strategy you can implement to retail. What I found out so far, it's some kind of a cost-benefit analysis. Based upon what you purchase, you say if you want to return, you're going to say, it's not worth it because the product might be too voluminous, it's not worth it to retake it, and it's not high value enough. You say, forget about it. Maybe I forgot about what is a cost-cutting point, I don't know, but after a certain level, they decide, okay, we're going to retake it. Otherwise, so if you want to play smart and be Machiavellian, if you find the cutting point, you understand that logistic well, you can buy goods and pretend to return them and get lots of stuff for free. Believe me, they're going to catch up pretty quickly. But anyway, anybody tries to game the system, I was wondering if they would game the system like that. I'm not too sure it's going to work. Okay. Air hub, I'm going to switch to that. I don't have much. I will talk about that. Sortation center, that's the latest type of facility. This one tend to be at the edge of an metropolitan area, and the purpose of it is simply to route stuff coming from a multiple number of e-fulfillment center and route that stuff to specific zip code. That's what it says. Who invented that? Postal Services, UPS. Amazon is now replicating this type of services. This is essentially how it looks like. Receive stuff, and then they're going to sort in pallets by different area, and they're going to put them and send them to the last. Again, this is the location. Look at the Equidistant I-95.
That's impressive.
They basically have a very interesting spatial strategy. Actually, when it began, it was almost I was, as a geographer, I was in heaven. It was jaw-dropping, equidistant at every, I forgot the exact number of miles along the I-95 corridor. There was a pearl of sortation center. Now, as they add them up, it starts to get a bit more chaotic, but again, it's the same type of stuff. And the last mile logistic, the delivery station, usually, again, a little bit in the suburb. This is where the Amazon trucks began their last mile type of journey. The stuff arrived either from a sortation center or from an e-fulfillment center, or most of them now through sortation center, and then put on local routes. Again, this is how it looks like. People are familiar with that. Those little bins coming up, and the purpose of this facility is simply to put this on route. Again, we invented that, Postal Services, and it's been there for a long time, but now Amazon has a gigantic network. Actually, it is now segregating these facilities by weight. Because if you buy a dishwasher, it requires 2 people to handle. So therefore, they're starting to develop freight stations that are designed to handle heavies. The last time I measured, it's about 10% of their facilities were designed to handle heavies. So Amazon is moving into appliances, patio furniture, exercise equipment, all of that stuff. And during the pandemic, wham, and they build those quite a lot. Again, because you have to have a different handling mechanism. So again, they are now spatially discriminated, delivery station by what is heavy and what is not. And of course, your local freight station, locker. We don't know how many they are. We tried, it's not measurable. And now they're selling those also to put into apartment buildings, into, of course, college campuses, all of this as a form of last numbers. I map those facilities at 2 levels of metropolitan areas, New York and LA. And each time I look at a pattern. In the central business district, it was a network, most of the time, of course, of delivery stations. And the sortation center tended to be the point of interaction. And then you had a cluster of fulfillment center. I've not looked at Houston, But my suspicion would be for Houston, maybe something relatively similar. Same thing for New York, although there's a corridor I-95. Most of them are fulfillment last mile facilities, and then in between you have sortation center that act as an interface between the fulfillment and the last mile distribution. And I suspect across every major North American city, a similar pattern is going to emerge between the central business district or the central area and the periphery. So the capabilities have switched to the periphery, and the sortation center acts as a point of interface between these two systems of circulation and procurement. Okay, now we're going to move on for the next, about I have 3 hours left. Now we're going to move on to some other data set. I was able to have in a unit all the parcel deliveries for several years at the daily level. I've not seen such a data set elsewhere before. I'm sure it's there. I was able to catch it. Don't ask me why. There's some people who've disappeared because of that. Anyway, this is essentially for a large apartment complex in the New York metropolitan area with decent level of income. These are all the daily parcel deliveries. And you have, of course, patterns that are associated with holidays. We have what I call consumptive holidays, because the purpose of the holiday is to buy stuff. And you have also what we call celebrative holiday. The purpose of the holiday is celebrate, not to buy. So what happens when you have a consumptive holiday? You get a surge of delivery before the day. Surprise, surprise. Okay. What about celebrative? It delays consumption. It's simply spread out. So that's something, again, that's more sociology of psychology, and it needs to be looked at. I'll move that. I was also to have data about who's doing the last mile delivery for the parcels. And of course, over the years, sorry, I know in 2019 with the pandemic, things became messed up. But I got up to 2019, and the share of Amazon was, as last I checked for that sample, was 25%. And here's the devil is into the details. This is by time of the week by carrier, and you will notice something absolutely at the same time brilliant and evil. Amazon delivers the same thing, roughly the same amount of parcel for that unit every single day. Therefore, what this shows you is by taking control of the logistics process, Amazon is able to decide about the routing. And its first priority is, of course, to optimize and maximize the use of its own resources. So the Amazon van are always full or use as much as possible every single day of the week. And therefore, as time moves on, Amazon uses third parties such as USPS, FedEx, UPS, and others as the spillover effect. And of course, they're not very happy. But this image shows very clearly that this is actually very smart. And then you introduce new trucks. And therefore, by introducing a new truck, you have the possibility to now change the setting and reroute the cargo more and more and optimize this. And then you leave the uncertainty, you leave the seasonality, and you leave the fluctuation to the 3PL. And you internalize. So, believe me, Amazon does that across its network. Yes.
Is that also to do with weight? So the heavier items get placed on the other third party?
I cannot answer. Good question. I cannot answer. Well, no, I had to measure the parcel, but I did not know about the weight characteristic because Amazon handles heavy as well. So I don't know about its strategy concerning weight or volume.
What about the geographic layout? Like it's harder to get to certain rural areas.
Yeah. The problem with this is it was one sample, which I got every parcel for 5 years. But of course, if we spread the geography, there will be fluctuation. There might be different strategy, but we don't have the data. If you can get the data, I want to be your friend.
There's a great book of 2022 called Amazon Unbound that talks about the strategy. The strategy changed dramatically, I think, for Christmas 2018, where FedEx and UPS failed at least during the Christmas season. They gave them the impetus from there on to invest in their own trucks. But your picture, your histogram actually speaks volumes, right, about the diversification that they're using.
I would talk and it remains consistent.
And the prices on USPS for reduced
every
prices.
the share increases equally across the week. So if you UPS and FedEx, you cannot introduce weekend deliveries because Amazon is going to route it its way first. That's interesting. Again, who knows? It depends on the market. But I was in the market, a very high density area in New York, metropolitan area. But I got a data, I'm going to use it. And this is again, you probably have not seen that before. I was able to get the delivery time and the time that the recipient takes his or her parcel. Delivery time, of course, after rush hour, 65% of all the deliveries, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So that's the peak. The parcels are collected usually between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Surprise, surprise, people come back from work, and then get their stuff. But it's okay, that's cool, that's fine. What does it tell you? The more you have e-commerce, you cannot change the time difference. Actually, we started to get email where I live, say, please collect your parcel. Lobby is full. So the more e-commerce there is, and since you cannot play with this, of course, they won't change that. Say, no, I optimize my driver. I want to be outside rush hour. So therefore, the difference between this is an accumulation of inventory in the lobby, the common area. And the more there is commerce and the more you cannot play with this, the more you need to change the design. Actually, I know some buildings, they have to basically shut down an apartment and then transform this apartment into a temporary warehouse. The doorman or door person, whatever you want, especially in New York, there are a lot of apartment buildings that have a person in the lobby. That person is now a warehouse manager. That's 70% of their job is to receive parcels, scan them, store them, then put them in the system for the. So this is changing dramatically facility and housing design. And many buildings were built a long time ago. It was not part of the process, and now you need more space because I have measured it, and I'm sure through other data, exactly there is some time of a 6-7 hours time difference between the drop-off and the pickup. If it's your front door, you don't care. It gives opportunity. Again, if you want to steal, this is where you go stealing parcels. Okay? Sorry, but that's true. This is where you go. Yes, go ahead.
How much does having new technology like lockers that open and close themselves change the pickup time? Because my old apartment complex had that, where we didn't have to go into a common area. They just had lockers that the delivery people would go and scan, and then you can pick it up whenever.
Yeah.
So then you're not constricted by the lobby.
Yeah. But here's a problem with that. The time difference between the pickup and delivery remain because you work, you're at the aggregate level, this is what you get. You're always going to be, it's always going to be an average 6 hours, something like that, by the time it's delivered, by the time you pick up. So if they want to push that more, they're going to need more lockers and more lockers. Unless they start to put penalties or bonuses, that there could be incentives, but excessively difficult to manage because it's linked with human behavior between the rationality of deliveries, which is optimized, rush hour, delivery routes, and human beings saying, I come home tonight and pick up my stuff. And if it's Friday, I won't pick it up, I'm going to pick up on Monday because I'm going over the weekend. You'll be surprised how many parcels are picked up after 2 or 4 days. And that type of thing. Okay, as we say in Canadian, that's about it. So the goal of my presentation was to show you the footprint of Amazon, the logistical facilities that I've designed, and the horizontal and vertical integration process that went behind this. And again, it's an interesting question. To what extent is this sustainable? Is this more efficient and consume less energy, more, I would say, less, kilometer passenger, or that takes ton kilometers, another type of system? We're not entirely convinced about that. And again, that's beyond my pay grade because that's a very complex OR type of approach with data and test density, multiple samples because it's going to be a function of urban density as well. So many spatial structure factors are behind this. But overall, Amazon has behaved excessively rationally in a strategy that essentially allowed it to give you a delivery platform which works within 48 hours or so. I don't think there's much more time improvement to be made. Who knows? There's some fast delivery strategy which you can get sooner than that, but it comes at a cost. In that case, again, as a customer, what is your expectation in terms of delay between what you order and when you receive it? Of course, depending on the type of good. There's a possibility of segmentation, which I'm trying to do. And but not getting so efficient that they less and less need prime because everything becomes To some extent, of course, if you order, let's say, a refrigerator, there's gonna be some issue, but anything else comes relatively quick. And thank you very much. Again, 3 textbook that I was involved in: transport geography, port economics, and city logistics, where this is discussed quite in detail. Each one of them is available online for free. This one celebrates this year its 25th anniversary. You know, I spent my whole life. This one gets about 2 million visitors per year. I would say 10,000 visitors per day for this one. This one about 2,000. This one about 200. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.